The neo-Darwinist evolutionists offer me nothing, literally nothing. Because when we ask them about the creator, there's nothing. When we ask them about the cause of everything existing, nothing. When we ask them about what existed before the Big Bang, before the existence of the universe, nothing. When we ask them what happens to us after we die, nothing. It's a very difficult conversation that you might possibly have with a neo-Darwinist, because literally everything for them is nothing. So everything came from nothing and everything goes back to nothing. But that's not the most frustrating part. Today I took some time off to just leave work and just learn something new. And I came across this video about whales, about the alleged evolution of whales from land mammals into ocean-dwelling creatures. And there's this evolutionary belief that whales were originally land creatures that somehow ended up in the water and adapted and evolved to become whales. And the sign of that, for example, is the structure of their fins, which has a similar bone structure as a hand. Now, the video that I saw was actually a counter argument to that, which basically used mathematics and logic to prove that there is no way that a whale could have been a land animal and ended up in the ocean and became a marine animal, for a number of reasons. One, when you look at it mathematically, there is not enough time since the creation of the universe to implement that number of changes. Let's say, for example, for the tail of the whale to evolve, let's say that took only 2 genes. For those 2 genes to form and to lead to the creation of that whale, realistically, if you look at what the evolutionists themselves say, it would take about 50 to 60 million years for just the tail to form. So these guys proved it mathematically and also logically, also using the fossil record to show that this is not possible, because there is no fossil record of the intermediary of an animal that was a land animal and then somehow ended up in the water, and that missing link between, say, an elephant and a whale. It doesn't exist. And as much as they said at one stage that fossils will be found, every year more and more fossils are being found that actually show that during especially the Cambrian period, there was a sudden explosion and sudden appearance of life forms rather than a gradual evolution. But okay, I have a viewpoint. I'm a Muslim. I have a viewpoint about creation, about a creator and a creation, which is not to say that I'm not open-minded to counter-arguments. But that's where the trouble comes in. The trouble comes in where these guys refuse to offer counter-arguments. In fact, if you look at the guru of the neo-Darwinists, the big, who's recognized as the de facto chief, it's Dawkins. And if you look at the way that Dawkins debates, it gives you nothing. Again, evolutionists give you nothing. It gives you nothing, because there is seldom any intelligent logic to it. And all of their debates actually follow one simple pattern, which is more about the rhetoric than about proving their standpoint. It's more about trying to show how clever you are, or trying to silence the person who is debating you, rather than to stand up and say, I believe this because evidence A, B, and C. And I would love to know, what is your evidence? Because if there's no evidence, then it's nothing more than a religion, scientism. It's just something that you believe in the unseen, believe in something that you haven't measured, haven't seen, haven't really proven yet. And that's what you accuse religions of doing. So what is the debating tactic? Now this is very important to understand, because this is used in a number of places where people don't have anything to stand on. They don't have a ground to stand on. And it's not the evolutionists. It's anybody who is trying to dodge an actual issue. And if you see this debating technique in use, be aware of it. I don't know if there's an actual name for it, but I call it the Dawkinsian debating method. Now, how do they start? The first thing they'll do is they'll establish authority. They'll say something like, see, I have a PhD. I have so many years of experience. I've spent my whole life. I've been there. I've done this. So they establish their own authority. The second thing they'll do is epistemic dismissal, meaning they'll downgrade you. Who are you? You don't understand the science. You don't understand the history. You don't understand the nuances. So authority and epistemic dismissal. Put the other person down. That's the second thing. The third thing they'll do is give an obscure explanation. There's a word for this in critical thinking. It's called obscurism or something. Basically, they'll give you a very technical, highly convoluted explanation that shows you or attempts to show you that you are uninitiated, that you are uneducated, that you don't understand what are the nuances, you don't have the necessary knowledge. Because the moment you ask them about something, they say, well, see, you want to debate me, but you don't know these concepts. You see how they make themselves out to be the intellectual class by offering these. And dare you ask, they will run you down. Now that is followed, step 4, by a non sequitur. A non sequitur is a conclusion that doesn't logically lead from the premises that were placed forward. So for example, and I'll give you a silly extreme example, human beings are mortal. I'm a human being, hence bananas are yellow. That's an extreme example. It's a silly example, but it's an example of a non sequitur. You were not expecting that, because you would expect something that, okay, maybe I was going to say that I am mortal. That's a logical conclusion, but a non sequitur is the opposite of that. So then they end it with a non sequitur. After that convoluted explanation, they will say something like, hence, your ideas of a creator are unfounded or ignorant, but usually something more condescending than that. Then this is where now they'll slide in a sleight of hand, right? So you avoided the actual debate, you came up with a non sequitur, and before you can stand up and argue, I mean, it's like somebody just gave you a slap. Before you can recover from that, then they'll do the sleight of hand, and then they'll shift the attention towards something unrelated, meaning maybe they'll bring up some concept about religion that which are in their usual playbooks, but how does God allow suffering in the world if you believe in God? Tell me that. So you are still reeling from that non sequitur, you're reeling from that utter intellectual trash that they threw at you, and all that happened prior, and now suddenly, before you know it, the subject is changed. Tell me that now. And if you try to go back, they'll say, but answer this question first. And they'll bog you so into this one here that you won't be able to answer. They'll drill that home. And then once you find yourself in that situation, then comes the inevitable ad hominem attack. You are an ignorant fool because you can't even answer that question. And then comes the final part, which is the rhetorical exit. And Dawkins is famous for this. Mic drop, walk away. I've done my thing. I've proved my point. Now you'll see a lot of people debating like this. Jordan Peterson debates like this also. It's always the same pattern. Maybe one or two things might be missing, or one or two things might switch around, but this is the pattern for debating, and that's why it's impossible to debate them, which is actually has proven to be the Achilles heel, because more and more people have come to realize that this is what's happening. People are not stupid. They understand that, person A has put forward a very, very structured, logical argument against evolution, against a neo-Darwinist. But neo-Darwinist has just gone through this dance. He's just gone through these motions here of this, of his own particular way of debating, and he said nothing, meaning he's got nothing. That's why I said evolutionists offer me nothing.